The divorce papers landed on the kitchen table while both of my newborn sons slept against my chest, and my husband smiled as if he had just won something. "Sign them," Brad said. Behind him stood his boss, Vanessa Holt, one hand on his shoulder. In her cream wool coat and red lipstick, she had the calm expression of someone who believed money made her untouchable. I had been home from Fort Belvoir Community Hospital for only 3 days. At 42, I was recovering from an emergency C-section on hospital coffee and barely 2 hours of sleep. The twins still wore their blue hospital bands. My army duffel sat half unpacked by the closet, and my boots dried near the vent as a December storm battered Northern Virginia. "You brought her here?" I asked. Brad told me not to make things uglier. Diane, my mother-in-law, stood by the breakfast bar. Her idea of postpartum help was criticizing my baby blankets and calling formula lazy. Vanessa inspected my kitchen like a rental while Brad pushed over a manila envelope. He called the papers fair. I could keep my personal belongings, and he would handle the house. I almost laughed. The house my re-enlistment bonus helped save? Diane snapped that I should stop playing the military martyr. One twin stirred as Brad leaned closer and told me to sign that night. His face held no fear or guilt, only confidence that a woman 3 days postpartum, stitched and holding 2 infants, was too exhausted to fight. When I asked where we should go, Vanessa said there were shelters for situations like this, as if I were a scheduling problem. Diane pointed to the door and ordered me to take my babies out because I had embarrassed the family long enough. Wind rattled the windows. Above the fireplace hung our Christmas stockings. "Mine," said Rachel. Brad said Dad, though he had not changed one diaper since we came home. I neither signed nor screamed. I took the diaper bag, tucked both boys inside my coat, and walked into the snow. At my old Ford Escape, my hands shook so badly I dropped the keys twice. Before starting the engine, I called neither police nor Brad. I called my commanding officer. The heater barely warmed my feet, snow defeated the wipers, and both babies wailed. They understood neither cold nor fear, only hunger. My phone rang before I had even backed out of the driveway. "Captain Rachel Carter?" "Yes, sir." It was my battalion commander, Colonel James Whitaker. I looked back at our brick house in Alexandria as Brad shut off the porch light and told him I was leaving home. After a pause, he asked whether the babies and I were safe. Nobody had asked me that all evening. When I answered, "I think so," he said, "that was not good enough." Those words broke me. For the first time since Brad arrived with Vanessa, silent tears rolled down my face as I tried to speak over the twins' cries. Colonel Whitaker let me cry, then directed me to Fisher House near Walter Reed and promised to call ahead. When I protested, he reminded me that after 21 years of service, accepting help was not charity. 21 years. Afghanistan, Kuwait, birthdays overseas, even my mother's funeral missed, because my unit could not rotate me home. I had never asked the Army for anything but another assignment. Now I needed a warm room for my sons. 40 minutes later, Martha, a volunteer in her late 60s wearing fuzzy slippers under a winter coat, met us at the door. She asked no questions, only opened it wider and said, "Let us get those little boys warm." Sometimes kindness sounds like one person heating a bottle while another unfolds a clean blanket. That night, it sounded like Martha asking whether I wanted chicken soup. I had not eaten since breakfast. "I would love some." Reality arrived the next morning. My account held $1,842. The mortgage was due in 12 days, and Brad had cut off our joint card before midnight. When my diaper order was declined twice, I knew he had planned it. Martha looked over my shoulder. "Men like that usually do." By noon, Brad sent me a text. "Have your attorney contact mine." Nothing about the babies or whether we had survived the storm. 5 minutes later came another message. "Do not make this difficult. Vanessa and I are moving forward." Less than 24 hours after throwing his newborn sons out, I deleted both messages. That afternoon, Major Elena Brooks, a legal assistance attorney on base, heard everything. She asked who paid the down payment and whose names were on the original deed. When I answered that my parents paid and the deed named my father and me, she smiled. "I do not think your husband understands what he has done." For the first time since leaving, I felt something besides grief, curiosity. Major Brooks opened a folder. We need every financial record Brad has touched during the last 5 years. Why? Because men who believe they have already won usually become careless. Something told me Brad had been careless for a very long time. Over the next week, I learned that leaving a bad marriage is emotional, but untangling one is business. Every morning at 6, I fed the twins and walked them around Fisher House until they slept. Then I gathered mortgage records, tax returns, insurance policies, bank statements, and loan documents. By the 4th day, the dining table resembled an evidence room. Major Brooks arrived after work with 2 coffees and a legal pad. I told her sleeplessness had kept me busy. I had already done my crying. Minutes into the documents, her smile vanished. She showed me that Brad had refinanced the house through a home equity loan the previous year. I had signed nothing, yet the document said I had. The signature looked almost right. The slant, initials, and flourish, but it was not mine. After thousands of military signatures, I knew my handwriting. Someone had practiced it. Major Brooks spoke carefully. This may be forgery. I could barely breathe. The house had belonged to my parents, and Dad kept me on the deed for my future children. Brad had secretly borrowed nearly $300,000 against it. Now we had to find where the money went. 2 days later, the answer began appearing, not from a bank, but from Facebook. A co-worker's holiday party photos showed Vanessa beside Brad in unfamiliar diamond earrings. Beneath the caption, someone wrote, "Love your new beach house." Beach house. Brad and I had never owned a beach house. I opened Vanessa's profile. There she was, standing on a deck, overlooking the Chesapeake Bay. Behind her stood Brad with his arm around her waist. The photograph had been posted 8 months earlier. 8 months. He had been with her while we chose names, painted the nursery, and attended prenatal appointments. I closed the laptop. Not because I was angry, but because suddenly everything made sense. That evening, Dad called to ask about his grandsons. After hearing they were healthy and constantly eating, he asked about me. I almost lied, then told him everything. Dad then revealed he had never fully transferred control of the property. The deed still required his signature for refinancing or sale because Brad's questions about its value had made him suspicious. If Brad refinanced without us, he may have committed mortgage fraud. Brad was not simply leaving his family. He had built his new life on lies, and lies leave paperwork. Major Brooks had been right. The more confident Brad became, the sloppier he got. Monday began with bottles, diapers, Army Human Resources emails, legal meetings, and pretending I was not exhausted. The boys now wanted bottles every 3 hours, then fell asleep gripping my fingers. They reminded me that I needed smart decisions, not emotional ones. At 9, Major Brooks arrived with a thick folder and spread bank statements across the table. She had traced most of the equity loan money. She pointed to highlighted transfers of $96,000, $41,500, and $78,000. The transfers funded a luxury car, the beach house down payment, high-end jewelry, and repeated payments to Holt Executive Consulting LLC. While I had been preparing a nursery and saving for 2 babies, Brad had used nearly $300,000 of our family's equity to finance Vanessa's life. That afternoon, an email arrived from Brad's attorney. The subject line read, "Final settlement offer." Brad demanded the house, his retirement account, our savings, even my grandfather's walnut dining table. One line stood out. "Mrs. Carter has no realistic ability to maintain the marital residence." I laughed. I actually laughed. Major Brooks looked over. "What is funny? He thinks I am broke." She smiled. "That could be useful." That evening, Dad arrived from Tennessee after nearly 10 hours on the road, wearing his old flannel jacket and carrying enough food for half the neighborhood. Dad's face softened at the twins. After holding each boy, he noticed my weight loss and said I had been surviving, not merely busy. His hug showed me how badly I needed him. Over dinner, Dad placed another folder on the table. I stopped at the county recorder's office before coming here. Inside were deeds, loan filings, and property records. A yellow note marked one page, "Missing signature." I looked at him. "This is yours." He nodded. They filed the refinancing documents without my notarized approval. They had forged it. Dad, after 40 years in construction, new cheats always needed another lie to support the first. 3 days later, that second lie appeared. Brad called, not about the twins or to apologize, but to say he knew Dad had checked county records. He chuckled that it would not matter because the paperwork was finished. He sounded completely confident. Then he added something that stopped me cold. "And do not expect anyone at Channel 7 to answer your calls anymore." My stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" "I know you interviewed there. Only 3 people knew I had applied for a civilian public affairs job at Washington's Channel 7 after retirement. Me, the station manager, and Vanessa, whose firm handled media partnerships. Brad had not only borrowed against my family's house through forged documents, he was also trying to destroy the civilian career I had spent 21 years preparing to build. I ended the call without another word. Then I called someone who owed me a favor from 15 years earlier, someone working inside Channel 7. For the first time, I had a plan. The next morning, while the twins slept, I stood outside Fisher House with cold coffee when Linda Morales called. I recognized her voice even after all those years. We had served together in Afghanistan in 2010, when she was an Army public affairs specialist. She later built an award-winning television career and became news director at WJLA Channel 7. She also knew about my interview. Linda was glad I had called. I asked directly whether someone had told her not to hire me. After a long silence, she named Vanessa Holt. I closed my eyes. "She said you were emotionally unstable after giving birth," Linda continued. "She claimed you had anger problems and were not fit for a newsroom." I let out one stunned laugh. I have never even met her. Linda had checked my record first. 21 exemplary years, multiple commendations, a Bronze Star, a Meritorious Service Medal, and no disciplinary actions. Then Linda said something I would never forget. "Rachel, people do not build that kind of reputation overnight. They build it over a lifetime." Tears filled my eyes. That afternoon, Linda invited me to the station simply to talk. Martha watched the twins, insisting I deserved adult conversation. Channel 7 was all bright lights, crowded halls, cameras, and coffee. Linda hugged me, observed that I looked tired, then laughed when I reminded her I had 1-month-old twins. For nearly an hour, we discussed integrity, public service, and what happens when decent people stay silent while dishonest ones grow louder. Finally, she opened a folder. Inside was my employment application. Linda said she had never rejected me, only placed my file on hold after Vanessa's warning. Then Vanessa called 5 more times to stop her from hiring a supposed stranger, setting off every alarm Linda had. Before I left, Linda handed me a business card. "The station is launching a weekly segment honoring veterans who continue making a difference after military service. We would like you to be our first guest." I stared at her. "I have not done anything. You served your country. You survived betrayal. Now you are raising newborn twins by yourself. Our viewers would rather hear from someone real than another politician." I finally asked when it would air. Linda chose the second Saturday in March, exactly 4 months after Brad put me out. Driving back, I thought about timing. Brad had tried to ruin my credibility before I knew there was a fight, yet he had handed me something more valuable than revenge, a chance for thousands to hear the truth. Unlike a lie, the truth does not need perfect timing. It only needs a microphone. Interview morning began at 4:45 because one twin demanded breakfast, and his brother agreed. By 6, both boys had been fed, changed, and dressed in matching blue sweaters Martha had knitted. She stood in the kitchen smiling proudly. "They look like little Navy recruits." "They are Army babies," I corrected. "I suppose I will forgive them." For the first time in months, I laughed without forcing it. Channel 7 sent a driver to Arlington, where Linda met us in the lobby. I had briefed generals before, but she correctly guessed I had never been this nervous. The interview was not what I expected. Nobody asked about Brad, Vanessa, or the divorce. They treated me not as a discarded wife, but as a soldier, a new mother, and a person whose life still had value. Host Michael Reeves asked what kept me serving for 21 years. I answered, my soldiers, my country, and the belief that you never leave someone behind. When he asked about the 2 retired military working dogs I had adopted, I said they had rescued me more than I rescued them. The crew laughed softly. We discussed military life, late motherhood, and purpose after service. When the twins fussed halfway through, Michael smiled at the camera. I would say they are ready for lunch. Everyone laughed. Nothing felt staged or dramatic. It simply felt real. After filming, Linda noted that I had never mentioned Brad. I had not come to discuss him. She admitted Vanessa's calls had made her expect bitterness, but she found grace instead. I told her anger was exhausting. She added that it also made terrible television. On Saturday, Martha made pancakes, Dad joined us, and the twins slept through the entire program. At 9, the broadcast opened with photographs from Fort Benning, a deployment ceremony, and a muddy field exercise where everyone looked 20 years younger. Then the camera cut to me holding my sons. Michael's voice filled the room. Captain Rachel Carter thought her toughest battles were overseas. She never imagined the hardest one would begin after coming home. I had not expected that line. Dad reached over and squeezed my shoulder. Across town, in a large modern house overlooking the Potomac, Brad sat in his living room drinking coffee. Vanessa entered carrying her laptop. "What are you watching?" she asked. "Nothing." Then my face appeared on the screen. Brad nearly dropped his mug. The host smiled. "Today we are honoring Army Captain Rachel Carter." Vanessa froze. The program showed the twins, my military career, and Fisher House volunteers. Nothing about divorce or betrayal. Only the truth. "Why is she on television?" Vanessa whispered. Brad could not answer. The segment ended with Michael saying, "Sometimes the strongest people are not the loudest. Sometimes they are simply the ones who keep showing up." Before the credits ended, messages arrived from old Army friends, neighbors, and long-lost acquaintances. Then Brad's former accountant wrote, "Rachel, call me. I think I know something about Brad's finances. The story was only beginning." I called before I could talk myself out of it. The man answered on the second ring. "Rachel, it has been a long time. Tom Bennett had handled Brad's accounts for nearly 7 years. He avoided gossip, spoke carefully, wore the same brown loafers every April, and trusted a calculator more than his phone. If Tom was calling, something was wrong. Tom said the interview prompted an apology he should have made months earlier. He had resigned from Brad's accounts 3 months before, after being asked to approve financial statements he knew were false. I gripped the phone harder. "Rachel, there are things you need to see." That afternoon, Dad watched the twins while I met Tom at a Fairfax diner. He wore the same brown loafers and neat gray mustache but looked older. He slid over a manila envelope containing everything he had legally been able to copy. Inside were bank records, expense reports, tax filings, and wire transfers, marked with yellow notes. Tom highlighted an $82,400 transfer to Holt Executive Consulting, LLC, that Brad had falsely labeled a consulting expense. Brad sold industrial equipment. Vanessa had no legitimate monthly service to explain it. Tom turned to another page. This troubled me even more. Another payment, nearly $140,000, marked executive housing assistance, had helped buy the beach house without board approval. Tom could not accuse Brad of a crime, but the numbers suggested he might also be stealing from his employer. After a silence, I asked the question haunting me. Did everyone know? Tom said people had suspected the affair, but nobody knew Brad would leave me just after the twins' birth. My interview had made them start talking about him. Before leaving, Tom handed me an envelope that had arrived anonymously at his office. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no return address. Only 3 words written in black marker. "Watch Vanessa's emails." "What is on it?" I asked. "I have not opened it." "Why not?" I did not want anyone accusing me of tampering with evidence. Evidence. That word followed me all the way home. That evening, Major Brooks sorted Tom's documents into mortgage, corporate, and personal files. She refused to risk my laptop with the flash drive and contacted someone in Army Cyber Command. An hour later, professionals had the drive. We waited until the phone rang. Major Brooks listened without speaking. Then she looked at me. "What?" I asked. She lowered the phone. "The drive contains hundreds of emails. Between Vanessa and Brad?" She shook her head. "Between Vanessa and someone on the company's board of directors. Someone much higher." Although the twins gave me 4 rare hours of quiet, I could not sleep. I kept hearing, "someone much higher." At 8 the next morning, Major Brooks called. "They finished reviewing the drive. I am coming to get you." The cybersecurity office was a plain brick building with fluorescent lights, gray carpet, and government desks. A civilian analyst named Kevin confirmed the chain of custody and preservation of every file, then projected hundreds of emails onto a monitor. Most covered schedules, budgets, and travel. Then Kevin opened one thread. The sender was Vanessa. The recipient was not Brad. It was Richard Langford, chairman of the board. Vanessa wrote that Brad would obey her because he wanted a promotion, and that after the divorce nothing would tie him down. I felt sick, but Major Brooks told Kevin to continue. A financial projection said the refinancing would give Brad enough liquidity for the Chesapeake project. Kevin confirmed they meant my house. The room went silent. This was no longer merely an affair. It was an expensive plan. Kevin opened another file. "There are deleted emails. Can you recover them?" We already did. A recovered message from Richard ordered Vanessa to make me sign quickly because they did not need complications. He knew about me at least enough. Driving home, I replayed unnecessary complications. To them, I was not Rachel, Captain Carter, a wife, or a mother, only an obstacle. Strangely, that ended my self-pity. I no longer cared about disappointing them. That afternoon, Linda called from Channel 7. Linda said our interview was nearing 1 million online views and drawing emails from veterans. One came from a former employee claiming workers had been pressured for years to falsify expense reports. The anonymous sender attached payroll records. I now had mortgage documents, transfers, expenses, recovered emails, and payroll records. The pieces fit, but only mattered if those in charge listened. 2 days later, Tom reminded me that Friday's shareholder meeting would force public answers. I thought I owned no stock, but I had inherited 50 voting shares from my grandfather when the company went public. Brad had counted on my forgetting, and had forgotten too. Friday morning, I wore my Army service uniform, not for attention, but to remember who I was before Brad convinced me I was not enough. As Dad held one twin, I admitted I was terrified. He called that good because courage meant walking in despite fear. I kissed both boys and drove downtown. For the first time since December, I was moving toward the fight, not away from it. Holt Industrial Systems occupied a 20-story glass building near the White House. On my 2 previous visits, Brad had asked me not to wear my uniform because people there supposedly did not understand military culture. Standing in the lobby that morning, I finally understood what he had meant. He did not want anyone comparing our lives. The receptionist could not find my name, just as Tom had warned. I slid over my stock certificate, and her expression changed when she saw the voting shares. 5 minutes later, I entered the boardroom. Nearly 80 shareholders filled the room. At the front sat Richard Langford, Vanessa, and Brad. Brad went pale when he saw me and whispered to Vanessa. She turned, and for 1 second looked exactly as I had months earlier, completely unprepared. After reports on revenue expansion and profits, Richard opened shareholder questions. Tom sat 3 rows behind me, never looking my way. I raised my hand, stood in the sudden silence, and said my question concerned executive expenses. Brad stared at the floor while Richard claimed the statements had been independently reviewed. I asked why company funds paid more than $100,000 toward executive housing connected to Holt Executive Consulting. Vanessa stopped smiling. Richard denied knowing the transaction, so I displayed the transfer bearing his approval. Murmurs spread. The chief financial officer slowly shook his head. He had never seen the documents. I then questioned the monthly fees to Vanessa's company. She called them legitimate, so I asked why they coincided with Brad's personal purchases. Brad jumped up and called it ridiculous. I calmly answered, "No. This is accounting." Laughter reddened his face. When Richard objected to the venue, I said it became proper when company money funded private relationships. Whispers spread across the room.
Someone near the back asked, "Is this true?"
One shareholder demanded the documents enter the record. Others agreed, until nearly half the room had raised their hands. Richard's confident smile disappeared. Brad accused me of planning it. I told him he had planned everything. The lies, forged signatures, loan against my family home, abandonment of his sons, and attack on my career. All I had done was tell the truth. Nobody applauded. The silence was louder than clapping. The audit committee chairman moved to suspend the meeting for an independent forensic investigation. The motion passed unanimously as security approached Richard, Brad, and Vanessa. As I walked toward the exit, Brad called my name. "Rachel." I did not turn around. The last time I walked away, I carried 2 newborns into a snowstorm. This time, I stepped into spring sunshine and never looked back. 3 months later, an envelope arrived from the United States Attorney's Office. Ethan and Noah had learned to crawl and cared more about chasing each other across Dad's living room, so I did not open it immediately. As Noah grabbed the dog's tail, Dad called him a troublemaker. I corrected him. We had 2. After everything, ordinary life felt like a gift. The 4-month investigation brought forensic accountants, an independent law firm, and a county inquiry into the forged mortgage. Investigators followed each approval, transfer, signature, and deleted message, building the paper trail Brad had assumed nobody would ever examine. As Dad predicted, each lie exposed another. Richard resigned before the investigation ended. Vanessa lost her consulting contracts, and Holt Industrial Systems announced governance reforms and tighter oversight. Brad lost his position before spring ended, and civil lawsuits followed. The forged refinancing was voided, returning the house to its original ownership. Dad and I decided to sell it rather than keep a place filled with painful memories. The sale did not erase what happened, but it stopped the house from controlling our future. We divided the proceeds exactly as we had always planned, putting the twins' college fund first. A week later, my attorney called to say the divorce was final. After everything, that single sentence was all there was. No courtroom speech, confession, or shouting only one sentence ending a marriage that should have ended long before. I sat on the porch with coffee while the boys slept. The silence was no longer lonely. It was peaceful. A month later, Channel 7 hired me as Director of Community and Veteran Outreach. I did not want fame. I wanted to help veterans tell their stories, connect families with resources, and show that service continues after the uniform comes off. Every Thursday, I visited Fisher House because I remembered arriving with 2 frightened newborns and nowhere else to go. Martha still volunteered every Tuesday. Whenever the boys ran toward her, she pretended to be surprised. "My goodness," she would say. "Who are these handsome little gentlemen?" Ethan and Noah laughed every time. Over lunch, Linda asked what I would say to Brad. After thinking, I answered, "Nothing. He already lost everything that mattered. The truth did that, not me." People ask whether revenge brings peace. Anger fades quickly, but standing up for yourself with honesty, patience, and dignity can change your life. I did not win because someone else failed. I won because I finally stopped allowing other people to decide what I was worth. If my story reminds even one person that it is never too late to walk away from disrespect, then sharing it was worthwhile. And if you have ever had to rebuild your life one difficult day at a time, I hope you know that you are stronger than you realize. Thank you for listening.